Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I want to answer a question I've seen around my comment section after the last few videos. You see, while I've been exploring things like job retrospectives or old raid tiers, some people have caught notice that my footage of these old raids was not always taken from way back when, instead showing us as a party of level 90 players, but doing the fights as if they were current. That of course led to comments like this one, wondering how we were doing that. So I figured I'd make a video explaining what we were doing, why we were doing it, and how I felt about, the thought of Square Enix doing something like this on an official capacity. So to put it simply, we are doing what we call low item level raids. This is where the raid team all wears a certain set of equipment to emulate the health, damage, and healing values of what we would have had back during those relevant encounters. This of course has to be adjusted for the fact that we had a stat squish, so the calculations and values, it's not as simple as just looking back to what we had back then, the same health values, the same exact damage numbers. It needs to be relevant to how those bosses are balanced now. Then we can enter the raids unsynced with Echo silenced and tackle the fights as if they were current with our whole level 90 toolkit. Yep, no more sinking down to do old stuff with the group and really wishing we had more of our max level toolkit. If only that were possible for ultimates. Anyway, this isn't as simple as just wearing gear from that raid tiers era while being unsynced. As a player levels up, we naturally get stronger. So for something like AlphaScape, for example, a level 90 player in full AlphaScape relevant prog gear is going to be a lot stronger than a level 70 player in the same stuff, strictly from a stats and level standpoint. On the other hand, the way health, damage, both outgoing and incoming, and healing are calculated also changes every time you gain a level. You can't just strip a few pieces off and call it a day because of that. You have to be intimately familiar with the game's calculations to achieve something that hits the exact mark. Easiest way to do this, go in at minimum item level with Echo Silence, look at your stats, and then try to base it off that. But even then, it's not an exact science. So obviously, doing all those calculations yourself, it's a little bit of work. You probably don't want to do that, and you're curious, what do you wear if you want to do these types of challenges? Well, fortunately, 2 players have gone through the effort of figuring that out for you. Theopil Vacheron from Tonberry and Big Nuber on Genova worked together to come up with this comprehensive list of item level values for you to emulate. This sheet is public and is listed in the description of the video for anyone looking to bring this to your static for some off-season or pre-ultimate fun. Mind you that it doesn't cover coil just because it's really hard to get something accurate for coil. I tried it myself and it was just a pain getting a defense, health, and damage value that was all lined up because the player's natural stats at 90 are just so high that the mixing and matching it wasn't a fun time. Now the gear on this sheet is designed to emulate minimum item level, but it does end up being a bit more difficult than that, especially on the healing front. This is actually explained in detail in the notes section down below, along with tips on adjustments you can make to tailor the gear sets to your static's desired skill level. It talks about how important the defense and magic defense aspect of the left side armor is, hence why we don't really have much in the way of accessories and instead try to balance your left side gear to match the values you need. It warns you of the healing discrepancy, especially in Alexander and Omega, where you'll need a lot more healing GCDs to keep up. And a reminder that your limit break generation won't work exactly the same, mostly due to the nature of the undersized party feature. Now some of you might be wondering why a player would even want to do this. I mean, we have our current raid tiers, the raid design has changed so much over the years, what's the point? Well, first off, I'm sure some groups have players that just haven't done the raids of old. Going back and doing encounters that team members are not familiar with, regardless of how old they may be, helps improve team synergy and broadens the scope of mechanics that players can identify at a glance. Not to mention, us old heads love referencing old mechanics when we call out newer ones. You know how confusing it was to new players to hear us call point blank AoEs chariots and donut AoEs dynamos just because of turn 9 back in the day? Or protean spots instead of clock spots for spread positions. Yeah, that list goes on, and when you do the old stuff, you kinda understand why. Now, our group in particular is using it as prep for the new raids coming out, specifically Omega Ultimate at the moment. But we aren't just doing Omega raids like this. Sometimes it's just about making for a fresher raid day experience, so we go back and do older stuff as well. Instead of it just being like, oh, let's get weeklies done in a couple of hours, then raid log until next Tuesday or something like that. Or, oh, let's go do an ultimate we all have memorized after doing it X amount of times, just because of our experience as a team. Instead, we can explore old raids that people either never did or haven't done in ages, try out challenge modes with even more restrictions in place for ourselves, and work on team building. It's just an idea that comes with a lot of flexible uses. Not to mention, we get to play my favorite minigame. Who leaves the instance last and gets stuck with all the trash? So with the benefits and the fun factor of this type of idea, I'm sure you're all wondering the same thing. Something I think that's been wondered by the community for a while. Why doesn't Square Enix do an official mode like this? For years, people have been asking for a way to do old content synced, but with all your skills available. Some people understand the ramifications of that and go, okay, maybe only if it's a full pre-made and coming up with all these stipulations and whatnot, but why doesn't Square Enix attempt to do something like this? Why don't they just do what we're doing here in an official capacity? Essentially, a minimum item level, max level mode of some kind. Now, this isn't official, but my personal thoughts probably line up with the way the dev team is thinking, in that its lifespan of doing a feature like this is a big complication. Every time they want to update the game, they now have to consider this element or abandon it, and then it's just completely irrelevant anyway. For the sake of just blasting through dungeons or easier content synced with friends, I'm sure they could throw caution to the wind one day and just let us do whatever like people have suggested. But we're doing high-end raids, and the ability to keep them fresh like we're trying to do with these gear limitations would just require a rebalance either every expansion, maybe even in some patches. Between level cap increases, stat calculations changing, and the potential for another stat squish at some point, the bottom line is they'd have to redo the feature way too often. I don't think they want to commit that level of effort and resources just to make something for the few people who want to go back and do old raids with max level abilities. Heck, balancing the ultimate encounters has been a non-factor, and that content has remained relevant for years after its release regardless. Maybe they could come up with something where they just determine a flat stat value, or even allow you to manually select what your stats will be, such as your vitality and your main stat, but I don't know that they really have an interest in doing that, of committing the resources to making a system like that work for what will be an even more niche number of players. Some people like to say, oh, there's not as many raiders as everyone else, but, they put all this effort into stuff. This would be an even smaller subset of people, even probably smaller than the subset that beats Ultimate. So, yeah, I think we're hard-pressed to ever imagine Square Enix doing something like this. So, at the very least, the community can do it. And you know what? That's perfectly fine in my opinion, because as long as I can get around to other people, then it's cool. And hopefully I'll be able to share some more stuff like this with you in the future. And with that, that's going to be a wrap on my final video for 2022. I know some of you were thinking, oh, it's already 2023 where I am when I'm watching this and it just came out. Listen, I get it, but it's 2022 where I am, so give me a break, okay? Come on, give me a break, okay? Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for all the fun stuff we have planned for 2023. Happy New Year, and until next time, take care.